Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 1, A Son for a Son. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of House of the Dragon. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for House of the Dragon up to Season 2, Episode 1. If you have not seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, overall, I think this episode was okay. It reminded me a lot of a season premiere of Game of Thrones. In fact, I would say this episode, more than any other episode of House of the Dragons, felt like a Game of Thrones episode, and more specifically, like the season premiere episodes of Game of Thrones, because in those season premieres, you usually didn't have much happening. It would just be a lot of like character scenes with characters talking back and forth. In House of the Dragon, and the first season had a pretty fast pace, where this episode felt kind of like slow paced, kind of like reorientating the audience, much like Game of Thrones used to do, having character scenes or dialogue scenes with various characters. However, knowing the stories, because I read the book, and knowing that they only have 8 episodes this season, I have a feeling that we are going to swiftly pick up the pace after this episode. In fact, I wouldn't say it was all slow paced, because a major event happened at the end of this episode where some people had predicted that they thought maybe it would happen later in the season. So I think we are going to move at a swift pace, but this episode, for the most part, I think was just had a lot of character beats, with nothing wrong with sort of a slow start to the season, which will probably bode well. So the first scene we have is Winterfell. We get the nice Stark music again that I don't recall since Game of Thrones, and we meet Cregan Stark, and he has a little talk with Jacaerys. He pledges to send the Grey Men or whatever. So I wonder if Cregan Stark actually pledged more men once after he heard that Jacaerys died, or if that's originally how many Grey Men he was going to send. I'm not sure about that. But it was cool seeing Winterfell again. Then we go back to Dragonstone. We see that Daemon is like in charge, because Rhaenyra is like consumed by grief, and she's off looking for Jacaerys' body, and Luke Harris, Jacaerys' older son, Luke's looking for Luke's body, and Daemon's taking over in the meantime, and he's like just wanting to go to war, and he like orders that Rhaenyra ride her dragon along with his dragon to go kill Vhagar, which is Aemon's dragon. She's like, no, you're just whatever, you're not the king, I'm not gonna fucking listen to you. And so that was an interesting dynamic there. And we also got to see Rhaenyra, of course, go over to find a piece of I think it was Luke's cloak and a piece of the dragon, giving the proof that he is dead, and have a funeral for him, which is all done very sad, and I think it really does a good job of emphasizing how much grief she is feeling in this moment. We also go to get a brief scene with Valerian, and him getting his fleet ready. He wants to get his main ship back up, and the main person helping him do it is a man named Alan, who apparently saved his life, and we're introduced to this character, and I think from shows like this, they don't introduce characters like this unless we are going to see them again. We also get a couple scenes with Aegon on his throne. We see that he's actually a good father, but a bad king, because he brings his son to work with them, and mainly he wants his son to be involved in the being a king and learning what it's like, basically being the father to his son that his father never was to him, and kind of trying to make up for it. But then by doing so, he's like, oh, give the guy a pony ride or whatever, and is kind of fucking around when they have a serious council and they got business to do, and it shows that he's a bad king. And then we also get a little conflict between Aegon and Otto Hightower, as when Aegon's trying to give this farmer back his sheep, and Otto steps in and it's like, no, we can't afford it, we need to afford the war. And then when this other guy, Hugh, which I have a feeling we might see him again too, a blacksmith, comes up and asks for the money to be paid in advance in order to help build more of the scorpions things to defend against dragons, and everyone's hurting because of the blockade on King's Landing. And this time Otto goes to step in. He's about to tell Aegon, oh, we can't do this, but Aegon shoots him down and says, no, we need these weapons more than anything. So you see there's a little conflict brewing between the two of them. We also see Larys, of course, getting in on this conflict, and good old creepy Larys, the most manipulative one, going in and whispering poison in Aegon's ears, trying to sort of poison them against Otto Hightower. We also find that Alicent is having an affair with Criston Cole of the Kingsguard, which they were kind of implying last season, but here we get a full-on confirmation that they're having an affair, so it really shows how Cole is kind of corrupt and not that honorable. And then we see Mysaria. She did in fact survive, which if you've seen the trailers and read the books, you would know that, yes. Larys tried to have her house burned down last season. She apparently survived, but her whole spy network seemed to be, for the most part, disabled because Larys was talking about killing all the servants that couldn't be trusted. But, knowing Mysaria, maybe she still has some connections, but we're not sure about that yet. But we do know that she still has a lot of valuable information because Daemon picks her up trying to stow away on the ship, and he calls her a traitor and throws her in prison. But Daemon learns that he could use her knowledge, and so they make a transaction, as they put it, for certain knowledge, because Rhaenyra had come back from her grief, and she says the only sentence in the entire episode, she says, I want Aemon. And so Daemon goes to fulfill that request, and using Mysaria's knowledge goes to King's Landing to recruit two thugs. Now, I know from the books, and they mention this in the after show as well, that these characters are only known by the nicknames Blood and Cheese. And so he hires them to go kill Aemon. Cheese, I believe, is the rat catcher. And I love how they were through a lot of hints, a lot of signals about rats. Because I knew it was coming because I read the books, and so I took notice every time they focused on rats throughout this episode. And they did it throughout the episode. And of course, we got a line from Helaena early in the episode saying, I'm not scared of dragons, I'm scared of the rats. And everyone's like, what the fuck is she talking about? And I love it because this is all like hinting at what was to come with these two characters as they do the rat catching. In fact, I believe we saw Cheese himself earlier in the episode setting rat traps. But they have no scruples, and they're paid off to go kill Aemon. However, Cheese kind of exaggerated on how well he knows the royal quarters. In fact, reveals that he is not allowed up there, so doesn't know it at all. But Blood insists on going there because they need to kill a son for a son, is the phrase that they were told. But they can't find Aemon, but they manage to find Helaena and her two children, and the son of the king, which they kill. They're not sure which one's the boy, which one's the girl, and they ask Helaena to point to them, and she does, and at first Blood doesn't believe her, but Cheese looks at her and says, oh yeah, she's telling the truth, and they kill the son. She runs off with the baby girl, and to find Allison, who's in the middle of the throes with Kristen Cole, and that's going to introduce a little interesting dynamic there. So there's a few changes from the books. I'm not going to give any spoilers for stuff to come, but I think the blood and cheese scene with them killing Helena and Aegon's son was nowhere near as brutal as it was in the book. So if you're a show watcher, you're watching the show, I'm like, oh, God, that was just too brutal. I couldn't stand it. Just know that it was worse in the books. I think they did tone it down. For one thing, and this I wasn't sure after watching season 1, and I just rewatched it to be sure, but it seems like they cut a character from the book, that in the books, Aegon and Helena had 2 boys and 1 girl, but I just went on the HBO official website, the family tree for the show House of the Dragons, and apparently in the show they only have 1 boy, 1 girl. So yeah, I'm not going to give away exactly what happens in the books, but it is a little bit more disturbing, I would say, the scene. But it's disturbing enough, and at least they didn't actually show blood and cheese killing the young boy, but you could hear it. And I think from the sounds, I watched that scene a couple times, you could tell that they are chopping his head off. So, but that's implied, it's not explicit. So I think it was actually handled very well, because this is a very disturbing scene, and I think that the show needed to handle it with care. They can't skip over it because it's very important to the story, and so I think they did a damn good job at it. So, my rating for the first episode of Season 2, Son for Son, out of 10 is going to be an 8. Extremely good. Not one of my favorite episodes. I was getting a bit impatient with it because they were trotting along at kind of a slow pace, but we got a lot of very interesting character beats, a lot of character dynamics that they were setting up, which always worked well for Game of Thrones premiere episodes, and it works well for this as well. And of course, we had that very powerful, very shocking, one of the most controversial scenes in the story in the books, and at the end of this episode, which I think was handled very well, and is certainly driving the conflict forward. So that is it for my review of Season 2, Episode 1, House of the Dragon. Be sure to join me live on Monday night, 9 p.m. East Coast time, 6 p.m. West Coast time, for a live discussion where I'll get into way more detail on this show. I'll be joined by my sister Alyssa and Darren from D's Reviews, as always, as the three of us take a lot more time to break down this episode. So be sure to join us for that, and check out my channel as I continue to cover House of the Dragon and cover many other shows like Star Trek and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.